for folks that like to stay up after midnight. Whatever time of day it is for you, thanks for listening. I'll be joined in just a moment by my friend and your co-host, Matt Foster, and we'll be talking about what could possibly be this summer's best action film, Mad Max Fury Road. The fourth film in a franchise that had its start in the late 70s, Mad Max Fury Road is the first time we've heard from Max the Road Warrior since 1985. That's right, we've been waiting on this sequel so long that people born well after Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome's release, they're old enough to vote, drink, hold office, and be charged as adults in courts of law. The film follows our hero Max as he continues to wander a post-apocalyptic wasteland, running afoul of a totalitarian overlord who rules his citadel with an iron fist. Max falls in with Imperator Furiosa, a formerly trusted agent with the ruler Immortan Joe. She and Max are now on the run, fleeing the diesel-punk nightmare machines of Joe's army, while they try and escape with precious cargo, Joe's harem of wives, who want nothing more than to be free. What follows is a high-speed chase across the desert with plenty of explosions, narrow escapes, and high-octane white-knuckle action. But make no mistake, this is an action-packed film, but it's far from brainless. All right, so introduce yourself.
Well, my name's Matt, and much like Zapod Beeblebrox, I'm just this guy, you know?
And Matt, I'm Trevor Trujillo, by the way, and I'm reporting from Austin, Texas. You are somewhere else west of the Mississippi. Where are you?
I am at an undisclosed location in Utah.
Most locations in Utah are undisclosed. So both of us are writers currently for fanboytv.com, doing some reviews over there, and we're bringing you this podcast, hoping to bring it to you through the same through the same venue. All right, Matt, we both had a religious experience this weekend at the theater. What did you go see?
I saw The Revelation of George Miller, the Gospel according to Max.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
I'm hurt and ashamed, but I liked it.
Oh, I didn't only like this movie, I think I am actually chemically in love with this movie.
The movie, like, you know, in Reservoir Dogs, when Quentin Tarantino gives his summation of what he thinks Like a Virgin was about.
Yeah.
He says it's about this woman that she thought she was this big whore, and she thought she was jaded, and she'd seen it all, but then she meets this mother.
Yeah.
I'm Madonna, and the movie is the dude that made me feel like a virgin. That's my discursive but short review.
That is an apt comparison, hyperbole notwithstanding, because at the same I mean, you joke, but this movie made me feel like a kid again, like I was going to the movies for the first time, and awakened a lot of excitement in me that I haven't felt in the theater for a very long time.
Well, the thing about the movie is it works on a stack of levels. It's absolutely functional as a cartoon. It's absolutely functional as just like if you're a 40K fan, it is a bunch of orcs and they're chasing a guy.
Yeah, Warhammer 40K.
Yeah, it's very much just like here's this squad of guys and they're chasing a guy, and it's going to be a heavy metal abstraction. You need not know more. It works on that level. And then it's got a lot of narrative density for something that I guess technically didn't have a script, something I found out.
Oh, I did not hear that.
It had no screenplay, it had storyboards, and then they did pages as they filmed.
Well, and that's the thing, is this movie it's very kinetic. It doesn't stop moving, it keeps going. And even at moments where it's this chase across the desert, and at moments where our leads have to stop, there's this tension behind it, so they're stopped, but you're still not really breathing at that point. You know, you still know that there's a squad of bad guys coming to get them, and they're right on their heels. It works on that level, and on top of that, I mean, there's a lot to chew on afterwards. There's a lot of allegory, a lot of meaning that you can assign here. So you're able to walk away, have a nice cup of coffee afterwards, and wax philosophical about it while you discuss what does it mean when they did this? What does this mean? What does this mean?
It's an expositional triumph because if you compare it to something like, say, let me think, what's a movie they beat to death with explaining on screen? Jupiter Rising has a lot of scenes where they sit the title character down and tell her what is going on, where things are told, not shown. Then you compare it to the other extreme, which is Prometheus, right? I liked Prometheus on the whole. I would say I'm a defender of it. But Prometheus had the problem of it tried to tell a non-expositional story. And the non-expositional storytelling was too vague and too open to interpretation. The thing about Fury Road that makes it a masterclass is we understand what is not said. We understand that Joe has a harem. We understand that the war boys are a combination of his many sons and the healthy people culled from the city underneath. And we understand that the Half-Life boys, the really crazy guys in the white paint, that are like the kamikaze drivers, we understand that they're sick from whatever going on in the world. They're sick and they're going to die anyway, and that's part of why they're so susceptible to this Valhalla cult he's got going.
And that's the thing, is everything in this movie feels fully realized. There is not a doubt in my mind that George Miller doesn't have the entire structure of Immortan Joe, he's the villain, have the structure of his Valhalla cult all mapped out. We don't get to hear any of it, but it's there, and it makes it more accessible as a viewer.
And we're told enough. Like, the great thing, we could get a whole episode out of just Charlize Theron's character.
Oh, absolutely.
But she's something called an imperator, and we know that imperator is a title because there's more than one mentioned, and we know that whatever an imperator is, it's distinguished enough that it's met with instant deference. And so it's obviously some sort of commandant or lieutenant that is fairly high up.
And this is part of the any kind of pushback this movie has gotten, it's come from the fact that Max is not the lead character. Mad Max is the title character, but he's not the lead. And that's because his job in the narrative is strictly to be the lens for the audience to view everything that's going on. We don't get the full story of the religion because Max doesn't know, and Max doesn't care. He doesn't need to know that in order to join this race across the desert and survive. He doesn't need to know what Imperator is in order to survive. He just knows that this is Imperator Furiosa, she's gone rogue, and in order to survive, I need to stick with her and help her achieve her goals, which are X. And so...
Well, and most of the time, when a sci-fi movie... and you look back on a commonality with another great sci-fi movie, we're never told what a Grand Moff is.
That's true.
We just know that a Grand Moff is in charge of one or more Star Destroyers and falls somewhere under Darth Vader and somewhere above the rest of the guys. That's all we need to know.
Yeah.
Everything is proceeding as I have foreseen.
It's also important to note that in all the other Mad Max movies, Max is very much an observer, too, with the exception of probably the first one. He's a pretty chief character in the first one. And he's an indispensable character in the others, but in The Road Warrior and in Thunderdome, he's still just kind of this put-upon observer and the real drama is what's going on around him, not necessarily what's going on with him.
We've discussed this before over many an alcohol, and my theory... and it's just my fan theory, it's somewhat interpretational. Max's role in the story is he's the yeast in the beer. He shows up and he makes something happen. He's catalyst. He's not the principal ingredient.
Sure.
Like I said, my theory is almost that Mad Max, the character, Max Rokitansky, my theory is almost that he died. I almost have a vision of him. I would compare him almost to Clint Eastwood in High Plains Drifter. He shows up when something needs a nudge, and then he disappears when it's done.
Just kind of the spirit of the wasteland.
That's why we're not really ever even sure if it's really, really the same guy. Obviously, with the chronology of the production of the series, they've had to run with that, Yeah. The idea that they were going to ever close the loop with Mel Gibson is a sailed ship. Although, if I had a complaint with Fury Road, it would be that what writing there is in Fury Road, it almost seems like it was written for Mad Max to be an old man. You know, the implication is that Joe is a pre-war character, or a pre-event character, whatever
Immortan Joe,
apocalypse
he's
there
the
is.
villain, yeah.
That he is pre-cataclysm, and so is Max, and they'd be closing out their business. That would have really dovetailed in with the fact that he's the guy that played the villain in the first one.
Yeah, that's true.
The implication being that whenever this crops back up, I show back up.
Yeah, so just for the listeners at home, the guy who plays Immortan Joe, who is the big heavy, the big bad in this one, also played Toe Cutter, who was the big bad in the original Mad Max from 1978.
He's almost unrecognizable under makeup, but he did the same kind of solid from Rocky that Stallone did in Rocky V, and used a bunch of the same people.
I think that brings us to something else. Is just on a technical level, this movie is breathtaking. It's beautiful. It's well directed. It's well shot. It's well cut. The action is clear. It's crisp. It's slick. You never lose track of your characters. You know who's fighting who, when. And so much lately, it's been action scene is a tight close-up, and it's super shaky, and you don't really get a clear impression of what's happening. You get none of that in Fury Road. You know exactly what's happening, how it's happening, and it's all spectacle, and it's all interesting.
There's two debates in a modern piece of action cinema, right? There's, do you teach a fighter to act or an actor to fight? And then there's, do you go CGI or practical? And the thing about this movie is they just can both of those. They said they're false dichotomies. We're going to do great practical effects and build real awesome giant murder cars. And then we're going to also use every trick of post-production that we can or feel like using to make it all look real. The doofwagon, the big stereo thing, the rolling
it's a giant
sound system.
stack of speakers slapped onto a diesel rig on which a minstrel plays an electric guitar, a chromed electric guitar that shoots fire, and behind the speaker stack is a bunch of war drummers. It's a really slick, really awesome looking visual. I mean, if you've seen pictures from Fury Road, if you've seen Fury Road, you know exactly what we're talking about. And even then, you know, going back to what I said about this being a fully realized piece, it's come out in the days since this movie opened that character has a whole backstory. George Miller invented this backstory for this guy that we never, you know, got wind of until he did an interview later. But it's another one of those things where it's so over the top, it could be comedic, but George Miller just manages to make it fit here.
The thing about the doofwagon and the guy playing on it, well, to a lesser degree, all the vehicles in Mad Max, in Fury Road, is they exist. They built those props, and they went out and drove them through the desert. But while they were filming, that guy stood there and actually played guitar for the extras on the equipment on the truck. It's certainly not the audio that's in the movie. That's obviously a score. You know, the fact that at some point that guy stood on that thing and actually played for people standing on it, and they captured some of that energy. You know, it's there in the movie that these things were real and these people were actually out in the dust.
You want to get through this? Pick up what you can and run.
This also brings us to the elephant in the room, which has been the social allegory of it all, which has been kind of a source of contention, and I guess to a certain degree a source of controversy, if you count a very small percentage of a fringe group, making a lot of loud noise of controversy. I think pretty much anybody with a straight head on their shoulders is in agreement that this is a good movie and it's a fun action movie and you should enjoy it. But is the feminism that's inherent in here? Furiosa, who is played by Charlize Theron, is undeniably the lead character in this movie, and I think there's a lot of things thematic of this movie that are also very pro-female. I wouldn't necessarily say they're feminist or they're pushing an agenda, but it's definitely talking about a nurturing. I hesitate to say matriarchy, but a very, where the men are the warlords, the women are the caretakers, and they are the keepers of life. And they have compassion where the men have none, and I think that's very present here.
Mad Max, it's breakdown. Mad Max is the degeneration. Road Warrior is about the rediscovery of commodity. Thunderdome is about the rediscovery of economy. And then Fury Road is about social ascent. It encapsulates points about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's like, well, we got to the point where there's crops and gas again, and now there's trade again, and there's economy again, and now society is stratifying again, and are we going to repeat it all? Even though they're that they happen on a fuzzy timeline, they really are a coherent trilogy.
Or a quadrilogy, whatever.
Well,
set of 4.
Yeah, however you'd reckon it. Yeah, a series. A thing that's interesting to me is the women in the story. You have the brides, and you have Furiosa, and then you have the group they meet up with later. They follow that Norn progression of maiden, mother, and crone.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And that's the same thing. Like you see that in the Alien series.
Yeah, with Sigourney Weaver, absolutely.
You see that progression through the Alien movies, and that's interesting to me. But a unique thing, Furiosa is resonating with a lot of female viewers, and it's a little hard to put the finger on exactly why. Because we're certainly shown women all the time that are strong, aggressive women, but the unique thing about her that shows that, and the fact that the movie's succeeding with her as essentially the lead or 50% lead, the thing that shows you that maybe Hollywood's turning a corner, and the audience with it, is that Furiosa's gender is never intrinsically examined in the movie.
Right.
Even previous characters that we've seen, like you compare Furiosa to Vasquez in Aliens, right?
Uh-huh. Who is a strong, aggressive female.
But there's a bunch of yard sticking in the typical movie with a tough woman in it. Typically, something has to happen where, like, you know, if somebody else wrote this movie, she'd walk by a war boy and the war boy would go, "Oh, look at that there," and she'd turn around and hilariously give him a comeuppance and prove she could hang with the boys.
Have you ever been mistaken for a man?
No. Have you?
And that yard sticking, that fact that even the tough chicks are always presented in their context. It's always sort of lampshaded that this is an exceptional thing that she hangs in there with the guys.
You know, she's a tough person, but she's a woman.
That's the thing about Furiosa, and I think personally, and of course, I don't really know. Looking down, I find it doesn't particularly apply to me. But I think the reason that she's so resonant with some of the female viewers is because there is no implied, implicit, or explicit for a girl anywhere in the... She's tough, she's strong, she gets it done. There's no ... for a girl, no ... but. Because the script doesn't really make time for it, for one thing, there is no... they shunt the love plot off on supporting characters.
Well, and even the love plot isn't explicitly a love plot. It's just a connection that two people make. If it's romantic or if it's not is left largely up to the interpretation of the viewer. It's a couple of B characters. They have a moment where they kind of hold hands at a very tense moment. But, you know, I've seen friends who do that. And, you know, it's not necessarily even a comfort. It's just a connection that two people make that's very important to the story, too, because it also falls in line with a theme among forgiveness and giving people a second chance and showing mercy. But, again, going back to the feminism, I think it's not accidentally feminist. I don't think this is one of those situations where the cigar is a cigar. I think there's a lot of cigars in this movie, and none of them are actually cigars. I think that's what's beautiful about the Mad Max series, is that the wasteland is this blank slate, and whatever issue George Miller wants to address, be it the denigration of society in Mad Max. When we had the Road Warrior come out, we were just coming out of the gas crisis, and so that plays a huge role in that movie. When we had Thunderdome come out, we had 80s greed and yuppie greed and Reaganomics, and so it speaks largely to that. And now, there is a very serious conversation going on in the world about social structure and feminism, and I think George Miller is addressing that in this. And so when you take this blank slate that is the wasteland, you can say, okay, we have a community over here that's dealing with this issue, we have a community over here dealing with this issue. And I think the issues and what he wants to say as a message largely is probably where this all started, and then he built up from there.
The series, and we revisited it before we watched Fury Road, and the tone of the series definitely, if you think back with an honest eye on Road Warrior or Thunderdome, there is a lot in those movies about social structure in them and about how, it's what happens when barbarism happens. Mm-hmm. Fury Road is not the first movie where Mad Max interacts with powerful women, and it's the topic of it's a subtext in the movie. That note is all through the last 3 movies in this 4-movie series.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, much the same with the other issues that were raised. You know, yeah, the scarcity of gasoline was an issue in The Road Warrior. It's still an issue. You know, they talk about needing to drive across the desert to go to Gastown to trade, you know, milk that's, you know, human milk for gasoline. And so we're treating human beings and their product as a commodity to trade. And then we've got the trade that we saw, the economy that we saw in Thunderdome. So it's still all very much building on itself. And we still have those issues in the real world, so we still are able to bring those issues into Mad Max. And it's kind of George Miller, I think, wagging his finger and saying, you guys still haven't learned yet. These are still issues, but right now I want to address this particular issue and put it front and center.
And it's also, again, how deft he is with the exposition. Because if he was a little hammier, he might have made it blood they take to Gastown. You know, and it would have literally been blood for oil. But he did milk, and not just milk. Like, it's not just coming from cows or sheep. It's actually coming from humans.
And we're talking a tanker full of milk. I mean, this is... when you think about the ramifications of how they got this, it's disturbing.
Yeah, and so the notion is it's not just blood for oil, it's maternity, which is it's almost literally humanity for oil.
Yeah, which again is a very feminine thing. You know, men aren't going to give milk. You know, it's a woman's thing. It's treating women as commodity, which is also a heavy theme in this movie.
We are not things. We are not things.
I want them back. They're my property!
Well, I think we're, I mean, we could probably talk about this movie for another 4 hours, but we're coming up on the end here. We've been hitting Netflix for a few things if you can't get out to the multiplex this weekend. And by the way, if you have any interest in seeing Mad Max, see it at a movie theater. This is what the theatrical experience is about. Shell out the money, go see it in a theater, see it in its grand spectacle, because it's not...
In fact, I would fully endorse laying out for... if you have D-Box or IMAX or a large screen format where you can go see it, this is the one to dig the extra $5 out of your pocket for.
Absolutely, because watching this on your laptop on a streaming service is just not going to do it justice. But speaking of streaming services, Matt, what have you seen on Netflix recently?
I have seen a bunch of stuff on Netflix recently.
Anything you want to talk about specifically?
A specific one I'd like to give a little shout to was a little werewolf flick called Late Phases.
Late Phases, okay. Sell me on Late Phases.
Late Phases it's almost in the vein of a Bubba Hotep, or it's channeling a little Cocoon energy.
Uh-huh.
It's a movie that follows an older veteran who is losing his eyesight through a move into a retirement community. There's a lot of pet disappearances and a lot of just strange goings-on in the retirement community. And sort of out of idle crotchetiness, he starts investigating a little bit. On the full moon, his seeing eye dog that's very precious to him is attacked and killed.
Mm-hmm.
And he sort of vows that by the time the next full moon rolls around, he will have isolated the killer and put them in their place before it all happens again.
None of the neighbors saw any sign of this assailant. It's just an animal attack.
This has happened before.
Attacks like these happen all the time. Please, stay in your house, keep the doors closed until we sort this out, okay?
And it's that the investigative werewolf subgenre. Like it's very much in the tradition of like the old Silver Bullet. It's very much that, like, who is it? It's like a cinematic version of, the werewolf party game. It's much more about him figuring out who the werewolf is along with the audience than it is a werewolf horror kill movie where there's a kill every 10 minutes.
Okay.
I can't give it a full-on 5-star endorsement because, honestly, in the climax, in the denouement of the film, the full-on werewolf reveal is hampered by some kind of... The werewolf suit is pretty weak. It's a run-out-of-money situation where they had a good hands and face, they had a good practical transformation, But then in the stunt sequences where you can see the whole werewolf, you could pretty much tell it's a stuntman in a ghillie suit and a mask.
Ooh, yeah.
Like it's noticeable, and it does slap you in your suspension of disbelief a little. But the first 2/3 of the movie are just really pretty engaging. And you sort of, the guy's an old curmudgeon, but he's also kind of like, he's one of those Sean Connery, like old guys with a little swerve, you know?
Yeah.
and you find yourself nodding along with it.
The movie I'm going to recommend, it's been on Netflix for a little while now, but it's definitely worth checking out, and it's actually timely because these folks have a movie that's absolutely destroying at Cannes this week. It's Blue Ruin, which was directed by Jeremy Saulnier, and it stars Macon Blair. If you saw this little indie Halloween horror comedy Murder Party, probably about 6 or 7 years ago now. It's that same group, but this Blue Ruin is a total about-face, where Murder Party was a really low-budget feeling horror comedy. Blue Ruin is every bit just a super involved, dramatic revenge thriller. Macon Blair plays a young man who he's a drifter. He's kind of lost touch with his life, and this is following the murder of his parents. He comes to find out that the guy he believes murdered his parents is getting out of jail, so he decides to take matters into his own hands and exact revenge, which then spirals out of control and becomes this war between him and the family, and a lot of backwoods redneck pride comes into play.
Hello, it's me. By my count, that's 2 of yours and 2 of mine. I don't know how this ends.
That's how this works, man. The one with the gun gets to tell the truth.
But it's a really well put together movie, very suspenseful, very good. It's got some great dark comedy to it. And on top of that, Macon Blair gives a absolutely haunting performance. The fact that he wasn't actually nominated for an Oscar, or at least got some Oscar contention last year, is kind of a sore spot for me. But Blue Ruin, it's well worth your time, well worth checking out. I give it the full 5 stars. But the movie that's killing it at Cannes this year, and this marks its beginning in the festival circuit, is The Green Room, which also stars Macon Blair, and they have brought Patrick Stewart into the fold. I don't know a ton about it. I know that it involves a rock band going up against a group of skinheads, which is the patriarch of the skinheads is Patrick Stewart, and apparently it's another taut thriller from these same people. So keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, check out Blue Ruin.
Shut it down! Shut it down forever!
That's going to wrap things up for this edition of Nighthawks. Once again, check out on Netflix Late Phases and Blue Ruin, and of course, if you manage to get out to the multiplex this weekend, Mad Max is playing at a theater near you. You can find myself and Matt's reviews over at fanboytv.com, so head over there and check that out. In the meantime, we'll come back for you with another edition of Nighthawks.